All right. Okay. So welcome to our Ask Me Anything time. So as I said, this is just a chance to get to know each other a little bit and to have some unstructured time to answer any questions that you might have about convergence or soul makers or where things are going or, anything that any questions you might have, as well as a chance for us to get to maybe ask some questions for you so that we can know more about how we proceed in the next year. So, I wanted to answer a question that we let people submit questions ahead of time if they wanted to, and Vic submitted some great questions. I wanted to pick one of those to start off with, Vic, to answer, and then we'll open up the floor if you have questions or if you want to just put them in the chat. If not, we'll just ask you questions and have an early night, and that's fine too. No big deal. But Vic's question is a little more philosophical, I suppose, but it does help to answer some things I think about convergence, which is where did it go? Where's the question? Basically, oh yes, here we go. Vic was asking, how can those who are not actively painting or dancing or writing or involved in some sort of artistic discipline on a regular basis be considered creative? Or is that considered creative? And I think that this is a really important question for how we approach things at Convergence, because I think creativity is, when we talk about creativity, we're not a lot of times thinking about the fact that creativity is really a spectrum, going all the way from extreme, innovative, creative thinking, where you're actually developing new things, which is very, 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 like there's a very rare side of that spectrum, all the way to just we as human beings innately are given, a sense of creativity and just the way we approach things or the capacity for creativity in a variety of ways. And so we often talk about creativity as one thing, but it kind of lump in there all the things that it might encompass. Like sometimes we're talking about right brain versus left brain thinking, or play, the importance and necessity of play and having time for exploration and curiosity and play. Also, and like I mentioned, creativity and innovation. We also include in there the discipline of art making, particular art disciplines, design, craft, making, thinking, imagination, all of these different things, which are different things. But it's usually all kind of, and a lot of times creativity is synonymous with art. And that is not necessarily the case. And not all art making is extremely creative. Musicians can be extremely creative, but classical musicians in a symphony situation are paid not to be creative. They're paid to do it exactly as it's written. You know what I mean? Not that they're not creative people or they don't have creative capacity or they don't bring a sense of creativity to the way that they interpret and play the music. But that's not necessarily a highly valued thing in that particular instance, if that makes sense. In certain painting, you're trying to do something almost scientifically or mathematically, that kind of stuff. So creativity is a wide spectrum. But at Convergence, in our circumstance, our perspective is both that creativity is a muscle, that all humans have the capacity for creativity, and it's a muscle that we advocate for developing as part of a healthy spiritual imagination. So we do believe that creativity and developing that muscle is necessary in order to have a healthy spiritual life. And that might be different than a lot of other contexts, but yeah, it's necessary. Without it, something is missing. It's not possible to have a healthy spiritual imagination if you are not actively trying to develop your creative side. Now, that being said, I listed this whole long list of it's a way, it's learning how to see and be in the world through the eyes of the kingdom. And that's an imaginative exercise that takes some creativity, because we don't live in a world that reflects that reality very often, or in a lot of cases. So that's why it's necessary for us to develop that. So that's why we use creative means and creative tools that are borrowed from artistic disciplines to stretch us and to open our minds and our hearts. And often artistic disciplines just happen to be really great ways to learn spiritual disciplines. It's really interesting how they're good keys. So we it almost, and we'll talk about this sometimes on Sunday nights. It's really funny because those who do practice artistic disciplines can very easily be inhibited by trying something new. You know, oh, you'll hear people say, right? We say sometimes, oh, I'm not a great painter, or oh, I'm not a poet, or oh, I'm not a writer. But that's not the point of it. The point is to try those things that actually do stretch us and open us up. And so in this space, we're all kind of learning and growing and developing that creativity for our spiritual development. So all of us are growing in that way. And there's also the side of convergence that is acknowledging that creativity, especially when we're talking on that further end of the spectrum, is actually a gift that is given to people by God, just like the capacity for teaching or healing or math or science. You know, God has gifted us all to think and approach the world in certain ways. And God has gifted some people and called some people to really develop that artistic discipline or that creative discipline, and which has been traditionally underdeveloped or undervalued, underutilized in some Christian contexts, or many Christian traditions and contexts. It depends on how far you want to go with that. So we do want to serve and encourage and disciple those who are called in that way to lead with their gifts in church, but also in the world. So it's these two things. I think that's a very long-winded answer. I kind of co-opted your question for my own purposes, but that's where there are several times that creativity question has popped up, where it's come up, because artists want to be generous and always say everybody's creative, everybody can be creative, and that is absolutely true. But there's no pressure that necessarily means that you need to be an artist, that it's better to be an artist or a dancer or something than somebody else. There's a creativity that we all can develop as part of our spiritual life that comes into the way, like I said, the way that we think, the way that we approach the world, the way that we read the Bible, and the way that we play and receive the world that God has given us. So that, I think, is a great question kind of start off with. Now, please, they do not need to all be those kinds of questions. We'll sprinkle in some questions like that. But are there questions that you have about Convergence, or maybe what we're going to do next year, or things you just have wondered that we could maybe speak into? Yeah, Sherry?
I have a couple questions. I thought that was really interesting what you were just talking about with the practicing of the creative as well as the people who are gifted. So that's a new idea to me, of thinking of creativity as a spiritual discipline. And if I'm understanding you correctly, I think that's what you're saying, is that as a spiritual discipline, it would be something that everyone should participate in, or just could participate in if they want to. It's interesting to think about it that way as opposed to the second way you talked about with people being gifted with particular things that they would bring to the body, like a teacher or even hospitality or other ways that people
Right.
might be gifted to bring something. So that I was
Right.
thought that was very interesting, and I was just wondering if you could clarify it. And then I had a couple of logistical questions about convergence and
Okay.
SIVA, all of that, that I would love to just understand a little bit better, but I don't want to take up too much time from what people
Yeah.
are doing or what people are already aware of. So I can phrase
Yeah,
it
that's
later.
great. Well, let me clarify that first, and then you can have a chance to ask one of those other questions. I think like you were talking about gifts, like spiritual gifts, hospitality. I mean, I think that we are with like the gifts of leadership in the church, like apostle and teacher, and I think artists. No, that's a bigger. Okay, so let's go back to the other gifts. Creativity is one thing we all have capacity for. That's part of how God created us as human beings. Um, but we're all unique and individual and have been given different kinds of levels of different things. I think within the development of our spiritual lives, it is necessary for everyone to work on and develop their creative, their eyes to see and ears to hear. I don't know how you do that if you don't use creative ways of thinking. I don't know how you worship a God that is unseen if you don't have some sort of imagination. You know what I mean? I don't know how you read the Bible and make that come to life without, that's a creative act, or it takes creativity. Let's put it that way. And it takes a lot of creativity to take a text that's over 2,000 years old and much older than that, and try to apply it to your life and to listen in, to be able to. This is one of the things. Like when I went to seminary as an actor and a director who had been to conservatory education for acting, um, the textual analysis stuff made so much sense to me, and it seemed to be very difficult for some of my classmates to really pay attention and listen to what the text is saying, not just what some preacher or what I had learned, but what is the text saying? But I studied Shakespeare, and Shakespeare is Shakespeare. Shakespeare tells you exactly what he means, and you do what it tells you everything. And so this is where I'm saying artistic disciplines can actually help us. This is what I saw was actually taking some of the artistic disciplines, things like having taken movement classes and the body awareness that I have, or vocal awareness, or the ability to put myself in the place of somebody else. Because if I'm trying to be a character, embody a character, to try to let go of, 90% of training as an actor is to identify your kind of the way you move and the way you talk, so you can not move and talk the way you move and talk, like to die to yourself so that you can embody somebody else for somebody else. Like that has taught me so much about what does that all mean. When I started talking to visual artists, I started understanding the way visual artists are trained to see is fascinating to me. We see the world in a whole different way because of the attention, like the discipline of attentiveness, which is a spiritual discipline, right? So there's one way, you can learn attentiveness any number of ways, but taking a drawing class or painting or learning, I took a class with a painter who was just doing this workshop where it was just like he was teaching us to listen to the painting by just putting like we weren't painters. I'm not a painter, just putting paint on the canvas and listening to what needed to happen next. These things can teach us how to listen for God. So that's, yeah, I think there's using using artistic disciplines, I think artists actually have a lot to bring to the Christian tradition, which has not maybe been utilized as well as it could, that can help us all grow in our spiritual lives. But at the same time, also really wanting for those who have chosen or been called to develop that space, we really want to advocate for them and to give them what they need. So again, sorry, long-winded answers, but yeah. Dan, do you want to add anything to that or?
Me?
Uh-huh.
No, I was laughing. I don't know if you saw me laughing because just for BTS purposes, this is what it's like when we're working on the podcast, guys. You ask the question and that's what you're gonna get. I'm just poking at you. No, I think one thing that comes to mind though, Lisa, is that this is you know, I don't know how many years I've been a part of Convergence, but this is a question that has came up several times from many people, and I think that the what I've seen is that the more involved they get, the more and more that this becomes less of a they start to feel creative because they feel like if they're in intellect that at some point they're going to be more creative in certain ways than a visual artist because they're thinking in a different way and it adds so much and we see it all the time year after year and year. So and it's
Yeah.
something like not to pick on Vic, but it's something Vic has said for the past 2 years since he's consistently came and I sort of chuckled to myself because I think what he brings to the table is creative in a different way and you don't
Mm-hmm.
have to dance or paint or you know what I mean?
Right.
I make music and I sometimes get caught up in that. I'm like, I don't feel creative unless I'm making music, but that's not true at all, you know?
Mm,
So
absolutely.
So are you saying that both of you saying then, and forgive me, but just I'm thinking about what I can bring to my church, that actually engaging, like the church engaging in spiritual practices that are creative or engaging in creative practices will be beneficial for everyone, I guess, because I knew your church was connected to the creative and the arts, and so I was thinking you were having people come there who were interested in that and open to that in a different way. So most churches aren't that way, so I guess just making it available and offering it, and then people can choose to participate or not. But yeah, so that's a very interesting idea. I'm
Yeah.
gonna be thinking about that. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you want to ask one of your other questions just to keep the ball rolling or?
Sure, but I don't want to take up everybody's time and space. I'm just wondering about the how SIVA, it sounds like Convergence is sort of thinking about becoming the new SIVA. Is that right? Am I reading that correctly? Or sort of, and is that like a sanctioned thing, or is it just a sort of unofficial, like this is what we're going to do because there's a lot of people that are interested in that continuing? And again, forgive me, I just am not familiar with how it's all working. And
Oh, that's a great question. No, we're not trying to become the new SIVA. When SIVA announced that it was called, I know a lot of people in SIVA. There are people who are part of Convergence who are SIVA or members of SIVA, and the executive director of SIVA has been really wonderful to me and sharing her wisdom and knowledge and that kind of stuff. And there was talk when things were shutting down as SIVA was trying to, shepherd some of their programming to other organizations that might help it live. I think some people had thought, well, Convergence would be a great home for Heart to Heart because our focus is really on discipleship and spiritual formation for um, artists of all disciplines. And so I've had some conversations with people, but I think the people who are really doing Heart to Heart have a real heart for that program and to see that program continue as it is. And also after some of those conversations, I also realized the desire probably from a lot of the SIVA community for visual artists. And that's certainly important, but we are interdisciplinary and beyond through and through, and that will, never change. Partially because I believe that it's extremely important for artists of different disciplines to knock up against each other, because it expands our capacity to be creative and to do what we do. I think it's really so yeah, so hopefully my goal is that, I mean, I am searching out there. I love finding all these little organizations and big organizations. I would love for us to build a network of just like, hey, you want to play? Okay, we'll play. Hey, you should check these guys out. No, there's no competition at all. We're all, I think, part of a bigger movement that God is doing, to a movement of raising up artists in the world, to be witness and be the church and lead in a lot of different ways. And I think it's going to take as many different people and as many different organizations as can possibly, and God bless everybody. So yeah, we're doing our thing, and if anybody wants to play and do something, I'm here. Let's do it. But yeah, we're not like officially doing anything.
Gotcha. Thank you. All right, shut my mic off.
Other questions?
I love the idea of getting younger people who are maybe being boxed in by churchy ideas that aren't they're not about a relationship with God. They're more about behaviors that are more traditional, and all the no's and the blocks, that it's like a minefield. Like I'm a visual artist, and just doing a nude feels like you're, committing some kind of sin or something if you're hypersensitive. And then, just doing the sculpture of God, you have a war on that one too, if you think about it, if you're really literal with the 10 Commandments. So, I talk about freedom a lot. Is there a way of beating the bushes to get, like, maybe the forming kid who may be being straitjacketed a little bit? And I have had a wonderful life in Christianity. I think it's been a wonderful thing, but I do know there's like a religious side of it that can be very blocking to an artist. And I noticed some ads that look like they were, being considered, and I just wonder if you have any ideas about finding those kids.
Yeah, I mean, what you just described is one of the big motivations for the Soul Makers initiative. And we, really to be able to speak to some of those big questions, those controversial questions, and to rethink the way that we think about calling as artists, and to ask better questions, as we were talking today, Lori, ask better questions about calling. And the Soul Makers, part one anyway, the Soul Makers curriculum, where we're focusing right now for this first wave, is on those emerging people, and to use the wisdom and the kind of community that we have at Convergence to come around and support. So yeah, we've committed resources in a number of ways to create the podcast, and created and committed resources to publicize that very heavily, and specifically targeting within like college campuses and areas where people go to, develop career in the arts in the world, the arts and entertainment industries and that kind of stuff. Yeah, so that is a big part of our hope there is to do that, and then to build some classes, and maybe really I'd love to see a cohort of that young emerging leaders in the arts, to really be able to kind of shape and give a strong foundation for to be sending people out into the world who have a strong foundation and can, answer those questions for themselves.
I talk about this too much, or I've mentioned it before in Convergence, but I met this brilliant artist who was I won't say he created happenings. I think that's what they used to call it. But these like moments, he'd create moments. And he was told that he had too much power. They knew he had power. Some pastor told him he had to go to Bible school. So he gets pulled off his art. He spends years at Wesley, and he's now a dental technician. And, it's just.
You talk a lot about freedom. That's and because of you and because of the way you talk about freedom, one of our hashtags for soul makers is hashtag free the artist.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go, Dan.
Sorry, I didn't mean to go on with that, but
No,
I
it's
just
really
think
important.
it's one of the abominations. And I think a pastor told you too that they should stop playing music for a period of time. And then if God gave it back to them, they'd know that they were supposed to continue to play music. Again, there's this fear of the power of the arts to touch hearts in a way that you can't control if
Right.
you're a pastor. And they did not, I think they left that church and been a little shy of, but I remember reading that in a book. So we just have to fight for the kiddos. And you are.
We are.
Yeah.
Really good questions. I know several of you were actually like, oh, I'm just curious as to what people ask. And that's fine. We don't have to have a very long conversation, but I just want to make ourselves available, especially, well, yeah. Anybody got a question? If not, we'll ask you a question. Yeah, Sherry, please. Somebody's got to ask a question.
I'm also wondering, like, and forgive me if this has already been spelled out and I just am coming in late to the game and missed it, but like, what are the plans? Like, so there's a podcast and you're thinking about, and do you have an idea when that's going to start? And will it be like once a week for 20 minutes? Will it be any sort of series, or just kind of how you're feeling the spirit lead at that particular time? And then how about classes? Is that something on the horizon in the later future? And so it sounds like you have a lot of things that you're planning for and thinking about, which is very exciting. So I'm just wondering if you can talk a little bit more about what are the things that are in the works now.
Yeah. Well, Dan, do you want to talk about when the podcast is launching and what that format will be? And then I'll pick up the rest.
Yes. Great question, Sherry. And also, Karen, just to go back on just affirming what you said, it was very affirming for you to ask that question and for us to know that we've been working for a while on that, and put a lot of resources, and we're really gonna like do this thing called, not, I wouldn't say outreach, we're reaching out. We're gonna get them. You know what I mean? And I don't mean that in a creepy church way. I mean, we're gonna get the people you're talking about, and we're gonna engage them, and we're really excited about it. So I really appreciate you saying that. And then Sherry, on the technical and the actuality of it, we are, to answer your question, yes, the podcast will be debuting. I don't want to say the actual date yet, but we are aiming for an August release, per maybe early September, but before the end of September, it will be going. It is planned to be a weekly release. Some of the structures of it will be like teaching chunks that are about 15 to 20 minutes, and then there will be other structures where it's more of a conversation, and those will be about 30 to 40 minutes. We're also planning to do, I mean, a lot of it is chunks of series too. So there will be a lot of part 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 consistently. And then everything will make sense. There won't be really anything that's like off topic of Soulmakers. So yeah, that's the plan.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. We have the same plan. That's always good to know.
I was waiting. I was wondering why you wanted me to answer that to see if we were going to line up.
What are we? Oh yeah, that's what we're doing. Yes, that's
Yes,
right.
that's what we're doing.
Yeah, it will, the idea with the Soulmakers with the podcast, we've talked about a lot of different ideas, but we really felt from a movement standpoint, the idea of getting the philosophy and the thinking stuff out there, and just kind of get people hopefully talking about it and thinking about it seemed to be the first thing that we needed to do. Just free, get it out there. So that's pretty much how we're using the podcast, is to kind of walk through the main principles and aspects of the Soulmakers curriculum, which basically is looking at if artists have the capacity to serve as prophetic critics and imaginative visionaries in the world, then what is our responsibility in the 21st century? And what does it look like to support that kind of work? How do you build a life and a way of making art that can support you in that kind of work? And us asking ourselves as a church, as an organization, as a community, how do we come alongside those artists and build the structures that are needed to affirm that and to train and develop and help see more of that happen? And it goes through the be, make, and do, and it goes through the course kind of a career. So we're starting at the very beginning, but we do getting to the classes, and we will walk through all of that material in different segments and have conversations like Dan said. So we'll kind of bring out like, here's some of our meat. This is what my experience, what I've thought, and then have a conversation with somebody else who has something more to pour into that. Hopefully have some arguments. I'm really hoping that I get some like, what are you crazy? That's totally wrong. I want to have those. I want to get to some of these controversial pieces. Yeah. And then this fall, which is rapidly approaching, but I think that we will probably start a kind of I don't know how to, an art and vocation group, an accountability, coming alongside of each other, in-depth group of probably a small group, which is maybe going deeper into some of the 7 principles of Soulmakers and how that plays out in our lives, but also helping to like set goals and get where we want to go and that kind of stuff for those who are further along the path, who are in that. And then also have a class or a group on discerning call. So for that very beginning, answering those initial questions that really need to be answered as you're starting out and really discerning that call. There's also the Wise Hearted One series that I think you've listened to, Sherry, and was previously published with Convergence. We're redoing that, and I'm going to put that together as a booklet and workbook. I'm like really talking with my hands. There's bugs everywhere. I think we'll release that as a free ebook, but also encourage small group discussions around that. And we might do some of those, that kind of stuff. And then in next year, I would really like to launch a cohort-based learning program eventually. That might be like 12 or 18 months to walk through the actual Soulmakers curriculum and to build in those habits and that way of thinking and have the support group. And then eventually have like the graduates of that, like we're building community around that. And in the meantime, this is some of the questions that I have for you. God has really blessed us in the last year of bringing artists who like get it and appreciate it and are already there. So how do we, I think part of that is providing leadership and some stability and a base for what we're doing. So some of my questions are around how to serve you all, and how to engage you all in helping to serve those that are not as far along and helping to develop what this community looks like over the long term. So other classes and retreats probably also around some of the bigger pieces within. So all of it can be broken out in a number of ways. And there's a couple of things that I know we're going to do right away. And then other things as they reveal themselves. And also as people come who's like, oh, that would be a great person to lead a retreat on, the cycle of call and how you move from one place to the next and know it's a new season, and how do you walk through that new season, and that kind of stuff. Or, that's just one thing off the top of my head. Yeah, the more I think as we develop people who get it, are bought into kind of the philosophy, at least to a good degree, that we'll be able to enlist other people in helping to teach and lead things. And then hopefully also tell people about it and that, grow. If at any point I answer a question by not answering your question, just tell me.
I just thought of something that is, maybe I brought it up before, but maybe not. This idea of the collector or the fan and educating in discernment about the art and the Christianity and begin to bring them in for some kind of advertised like discussions. Like having Ed Nippers answer questions or something like that.
Yeah.
And start that type of connection so that it's just an idea, and it doesn't have to be Ed Nippers, but like I don't know much about music, but I really love it. Like I like rock and roll awful much. Like I really do love that kind of music so much, and I don't know a darn thing about it. And it might be fun to have a little education sent about among the artists, but also among the collectors. I remember when I was pretty young, I'd never taken any printmaking classes, buying a book called Printmaking. Like, this is how you discern. This is like for a collector. It's just an idea of a way to broaden our base and begin to connect people and make artists more human to Christians. And, they can watch them with their camera turned off, and in a Zoom meeting, and then, slowly kind of, I don't know, it's just an idea. I'm just throwing it out, just something to think about.
I think it's a great idea, Karen. Our steps for kind of the big picture for soul makers is to start with the philosophy and the language, the concepts, to start putting it out there, then to create opportunities for education, to really teach and hone in, to then build a community of people who are committed to living and working in this way, and then to expand and build networks, to continue to expand those networks of people who are engaged with us in this, and also to create hopefully networks where we're supporting each other both emotionally, spiritually, and financially by buying each other's work and supporting, what's going on and building those networks of support with, other, collectors or people who fund the arts and just our, general neighbors and the world around us to engage, again, to keep borrowing from the convergence side of things, to maybe create opportunities where we're engaging our neighbors, people around us, in these spiritual questions through artistic means, right? So we're getting them, they're not coming to church, but they came to church. You know what I mean? Right.
Nothing like a Christian artists articulating what they're doing sometimes to kind of surprise people and get them sideways, like a
Yeah.
dream.
Yeah.
You don't know why you got hit so hard, but you got hit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anita, you had a question?
Well, to spin off of what you and Karen were talking about, so I hope Belmont University in Nashville is one of the places you're going to hit.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
my grandson has a podcast of bands that he knows, and that's something you might do, because there's a whole lot of Christian musicians in Nashville, and they love to do podcasts. And in terms of reaching youth, that's a really good way to reach youth.
That's a great idea, Anita. Thank you. Yeah. Mhm.
I'm not, I was trying to think of an idea that I haven't given you yet, Lisa. So I was
Oh, okay.
thinking, the one thing that I think that surprises me is there's no place to go if you're even looking for a Christian artist. Like there's no like database of us. And I don't know, and I only thought of that because as I have finished up my training as a spiritual director, I'm trying to submit my bio to all of these places so people can find me.
Mhm.
But right now I'm trying to figure out how to go about finding photographers for something I'm doing, and not having to I want it to be a process of people who want to do the work and all of that,
Mhm.
instead of like begging my friends or to do me a favor. But I wouldn't even know where to I mean, I know to come to Convergence because Lisa knows everything when it comes to the Christian artists, but there's no like neutral place for us. And I know that involves a database, which is, a very technical thing, but yeah.
Mhm.
Are we a place that could host such a thing?
That's a great question.
Yeah, because if I started, I'm just an individual, and then if I go on to be with, not if, when I go on to be with the Lord, because I don't plan to stay here forever. They invent a way for us to live forever. I'll be like, I'm good, going home to my makeup. So I think it needs to be an institution that does something like that. So it'll last beyond a person.
Right.
But yeah. And as I give the idea, I will say I'm willing to help with it if it becomes a thing. But yeah.
Yeah. I think it's a great idea and something to put in the mix. And probably can grow slowly over time. One of the things that I'd like to see happen this fall, there's a free app, or it is free to us anyway. It's a church app and it doesn't have much functionality at all because it's free, but we could use that for whatever Convergence people, Soulmakers people, to be able to connect with each other. It's kind of designed like a mini, like a Facebooky kind of thing, but it could be a directory for us and a way that people could connect with each other without having to go on Facebook, without having to go through, email, that we can kind of build a stronger connection as a community and share some of those things and kind of have that directory for ourselves, that may kind of grow over time. I think, yeah, I do believe that over time, I hope we will develop a directory of soul makers
Mhm.
of people that, you know, Convergence would recommend, maybe. I think that, yeah, is definitely important. Hey, Rodney, welcome.
Just joined my phone.
Rodney is the chair of our Stewards Council. So he's called elders or whatever you call in your church, but he's part of our leadership team, chair of our leadership team. Other questions? Yeah, Anita.
Lisa, in that directory, would it be possible or politically correct to include churches that have arts ministries in it?
It's a great idea. Yeah, I think that was something that Siva did do, was have that sort of list of all the different. So yeah, that's a project. Yeah, it's a good idea.
It would be really fun if we broadened it out as far as artists who use Christian imagery, or in this day and age, we could be somewhat neutral. We don't have to be in Christianese land. I don't know. It might be fun to broaden it so that we can include people that are using trying to work out of the Christian tradition that
Sure.
may not completely get it yet.
Sure, and there are lots of organizations out there already. You know, Christians in theater arts, Christians in film, Christian women in film. You know, Christian women in film in Ohio. You know, there's tons of, and one of the things I would like to do is find ways to network those groups together and make it accessible, rather than even necessarily duplicating, but trying to, that would be a long-term dream, is that somehow we would create a network of all of these, that we were an association of something, not convergence, but but just because of that comment, I also want to point out that Soul Makers in particular is really geared towards artists who are working in the world, as opposed to artists who are working in the church. I do believe that artists who are working in the church can get a lot out of the Soul Makers. I think it would be a great curriculum for a worship team, you know, whatever, and everybody and anybody is welcome, but it is designed for the artist who is at work in the world.
That's
who's
great.
going to, that is who we are targeting.
That's great. I don't know why that appeals to me so much, but it does.
Any other questions?
Also, back to your creativity question, when I think about that network, you go back to this brain, this creative brain that can take these little pieces of data and put them together and organize them in a way that's readable and exciting to people, and they can stay engaged in it. That's creativity.
Absolutely.
And it's not dancing, and it's not playing the violin.
Yeah.
And I would almost throw a prayer out, Lord, where those people with those gifts, send them to us, especially if they have a heart project tied to their gift.
Yeah.
In Jesus' name.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
If that's okay with you guys, if I threw that
Absolutely.
in. I'll stop.
Well, I mean, that we definitely need people to be a part of Convergence and Soul Makers who are not in those industries, and bring other gifts to be able to survive as an organization and to grow and to do those things that you said, and yeah, to partner and partner with churches. So I'd love to hear other questions from you, but Dan, do we have any questions we'd like to pose to them?
Yeah, you showed me a list of like 300 questions you wanted to ask everybody.
That was
Where are they?
That was Vic's list.
I know they were. Just joking. Vix was only 27, guys.
They were awesome questions. We're gonna like have conversation nights where we just go through those questions because they're really good. Well, I would ask for you personally, how are we doing? Like, is what we're kind of attempting and some of the programming that's available through Convergence, and sort of what we're talking about with Soulmakers, do you think that or is that meeting a need, or what else? What are you looking for that would be ways that we could serve you and people like you? Thinking about going into 2024, what do you wish that you were going to our website and seeing was available to you? Please, Vic.
Yeah.
I'll offer one broad suggestion, since I'm not involved in many of the things that Convergence is. I've been mostly with the collectives and a few other things.
Yep.
I love your presence on the internet, the Facebook programs, videos. I recommend that to all kinds of people. What I don't have a clear picture of is what we're talking about tonight. What does Convergence do? What's the 1-year plan, the 5-year plan? What are the various programs? Even the website. You've got an old one and a new one. And I have a hard time keeping the two separate. And sometimes I go to one and not the other. And I don't know, there seems to be a need for more focus. I think that would help people to get a better picture of what Convergence is today, and maybe what we hope it will be in 5 years from now. Because you've talked about a lot of really exciting initiatives, but I'm not sure outside of this group there's much understanding of where that's all headed and why it's so important. And I think it is important.
Well,
my
yeah,
reaction.
that's great. That is a big reason why we're doing the podcast, to be able to really start really talking about stuff and starting a movement around those conversations. As far as the website go, the old one is dead and don't go there anymore. There's a variety of reasons why it hasn't been taken down completely. But if you put in ourconvergence.org, it'll take you to vergenow.org. That is our website. I know you can access certain pages, but that site is dead. That's not accurate. So we were just talking about, Reed and I were just talking about that today. So we'll try to get that. I think it's probably ready to go to the trash can. We just needed some stuff off of there. But yeah, I mean, what we do is at this point is very simple. With Convergence, it's small group based. So it's the spiritual collectives and then our creative prayer. And I think that we're kind of seeing it as building over time something akin to a spiritual gym. So we're developing spiritual disciplines and using contemplative and creative practices to grow in our spiritual lives, for anybody and everybody. And as I said, to support artists in their call, discipling. And then that arm of how we're doing that specifically is Soulmakers. And eventually, it may not be by the fall. It probably will be more into the beginning of next year. We'll start to look at how we might do more gathering in the local, at the lab, but also been talking with people about how they might gather locally wherever they are. That sort of thing is starting to pop up. So, yeah, I think we're very concerned with trying to set sort of the framework of what questions we're asking, what we're thinking about, the language that's important, and involving people in coming alongside that, buying into that, and providing leadership and being open to how that plays out over the future. But right now, we're as far as Convergence goes, especially we're really based in those small groups. It's funny you said you're not really involved in what Convergence is doing, except the spiritual collectives and creative prayer on Sunday nights. And that's pretty much what Convergence is, Vic. You're there every time I turn around. You're involved in what we do. So yeah, that's it.
But I'm excited about many of the things you've mentioned today, things that you're looking to the future for. And one of the things you mentioned was I wasn't sure how you packaged it, was like a booklet. It says, here's what Convergence is, here's where we're headed. Wouldn't have to be elaborate, but something to at least give a big picture. Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of this is so exciting.
Good. That's good to hear. Probably, Vic, you and I should just sit down and then you can compile the book. We'll talk and then you compile the book. That's what you're really good at.
Oh, I get the idea. Don't bring it up if you're not ready to do it. Talk about that.
I think what I hear you saying, Vic, and correct me if I'm wrong, is I think is there a pathway through Convergence, right? And I think knowing what I know that's coming, like this idea of being a systematic introduction to Convergence, which I think that probably will happen. The reason why I'm saying that is because I'm a part of a group that runs a lot like Convergence. It's a group of business women who are founders, right? So all of them they founded their company. They're not, and when I first joined, a lot similar to Convergence, there was no like, you just kind of jump in, right? And their core thing is our weekly working hour. And the only reason why I knew how to function in that is because Convergence had already trained me. Like, you have this one core activity, and then you have these other opportunities. But finally, someone similar to what Vic was saying, so what do you all do? And so the CEO sat down because they run on Mighty Network. She literally created like a series of like posts that said, start here, A, B, C, D. And then I was like, oh yeah, I guess it would have been cool to have that in the beginning. But, so that's, if I'm correct, Vic, that's what you're saying. Like, start here first. Hi, we're Convergence. Yeah.
That's great. That's a really great idea. And that makes me realize that you all don't know that we just in the last couple of weeks finalized, and it's now active, a series of like 6 welcome emails. So if you signed up to our website, our email today, you would get 1 email a week from me for 6 weeks that explain that exactly like that. Hi, welcome to Convergence. Let's hang out. Let's talk. And then tells you about each of the things that we offer and directs to the website. And we're starting to use some of that material to send out also to our wider list because of this. But this all makes me think, well, that would be a great thing to just package on up and have it on our website that you could just download that or whatever. Yeah, it's good. Good questions. Anything else? All right. So anything else that would help us as we're starting to get ready to think about planning for 2024? Any other words of wisdom or things you'd like to see or for us to consider, or things that have been helpful or useful?
I do want to say, sorry, you are doing an excellent job. I don't think any of us said that, but yeah.
Finally.
Like, yeah. I'm the poster child for Convergence. If you ever need me to brag, I'll brag on us. But yeah, I think yeah, it's an awesome opportunity, you know, for someone that who is further along in the vocation of art. Like, I know how to be an artist, but not having that place. And I actually wrote it down for something I'm doing this weekend. Someone wanted to know why I'm a member of the church I'm a member of. And I say, I needed a church where I could be the person God called me to be, make the art I was. And so I literally just put in the soul makers kind of, because I was like, that's what I needed. And so if you want to be like, you know, kind of thing. So yeah, I have no complaints. I'm just excited to be a part of this, and, you know, can't wait to see where we go next. So yes.
Nice. Thank you, Patrice.
Just a kudo also that like especially the Sunday nights amaze me. Like I have a little notebooks that I keep things in, and it's a when you talk about creativity and worship or creativity and interacting with God, there's something about it that helps you touch God, I think, because you're reaching with your intellect, with your creativity, with your imagination, and you're you're pressing toward him, and walls start to go down a little bit, and it's been very it's been a very strong thing, and sometimes I've even felt like go back to that day and read that again. And it's just been, it's not like sitting and listening to a sermon, but it's more individual, but it's a very alive thing. And so I'm very grateful for it, and I'm really grateful that you're around, because you're so different than like regular churches. You're completely, you are a home. You are a home for artists, Christian artists, in my opinion.
Good. That was one of our early taglines for Convergence, was come home.
I can see that on a t-shirt, Lisa. Come home.
I
Convergence.
like that. I really do.
Yeah.
It's true. That's how you feel, you know?
Yeah.
I am very grateful to have made the acquaintance of some of you in smaller groups, and to be able to be here from afar. It is super helpful. And so thank you all for letting me, I feel like I'm honing in on on somebody's church group, but I
Not at
love.
all, Sherry. No.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'm
Yeah.
also thinking a little bit about how to create the space for people that aren't close, you know, like I love that that things are set up where there's opportunity for everyone to share, because I think that is so much like, you know, people meeting in the synagogues and hearing what the Lord was doing and having that chance to speak. And I'm very appreciative of that too. And just in many ways that I won't even continue to talk about right now, because I keep talking too much tonight, so I won't do it. But I'm very grateful, and I guess I would think about, I'm guessing most of you have some opportunity to connect in person. Is that right? Am I, or no, you don't really?
Not really. We're
Oh.
pretty much completely virtual at this point. There is one group that meets in person for the spiritual collectives, but even
Gotcha.
locally we're online. But
Gotcha.
what were you saying though, Sherry? Where were you going with that? Because I think that's an important question that you were going to ask.
Well, I think how to set up the opportunities for fellowship, and maybe it's
Yeah.
just that it's just so different to be able to do that online. You just don't really, you know, it requires a sort of stopping and starting. It's not like a conversation flows in the same way that it does in person. But maybe even going a little bit along with what Patrice was talking about with a directory, maybe that would be something that would be helpful, because then if we knew of other people that were in the area, at least there would be that to consider connecting with someone for business, but also for fellowship, or, you know, to sort of throw a meetup and have that chance for people to connect. So if I can help with that, I'm happy to do that as well. now that I know you're not all local meeting in a church anyway. So thank you. You know, you've been super helpful to me, and I appreciate that so much. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Sherry. Yeah, actually, Dan and I do live across the street from each other, but this is often how we meet. But yeah, I think the directory idea and maybe getting this app open so that people can just use it however you want. But I'm also wondering, Sherry, as we start this podcast, about the possibility of creating like podcast discussion groups in your areas. Like it might be a way to meet some new people for you, but also introduce some people to Convergence and Soul Makers through that. If we promoted that, to start to be able to create, some local support community for each of you and for us because we really are starting from scratch with that as well in a lot of ways. So those are helpful thoughts.
I'm just going to chime in and kind of second some of those thoughts, you guys. Like when you ask, how else can we be supported? I'm pretty new here, but I want to say, I feel so blessed to be a part of this community. Amazing, amazing, amazing. And already I've gotten so much support that it's mind blowing, to be quite honest. So I'm very grateful. But I'm kind of feeling the same, like that idea of, is there a way that we can connect and find each other so we can get some support when, in between times and through the week, or, just connecting with other people who might be doing something similar and, being able to have other conversations. I'm probably the farthest away, being way up here in Canada. And even if there's, is there, and I know your plate is full, right? Like you guys have got a lot going on. But I'll throw the thought out. Is there a way we can engage the churches somehow to start to know more that this exists, that other artists of faith can find you? I mean, I literally stumbled upon you through a friend who sent me an email about, who was the group that's closed down you were talking about earlier tonight?
Siva.
Yeah.
Siva, yeah.
And then I went through the list of who was connected to Siva and just kind of started, looking at everybody and found you guys and then, connected. But I mean, that was, what are the chances of that happening? Right.
Yeah.
Like, so yeah, is there something even that could be created that we could share with our local churches to bring others here, that maybe each one of us could take out to a few churches in our community or something and say, hey, we're a part of this. We just wanted to share this information, and that could support you guys, as well, right?
Yeah. So you're talking about like actual printed materials
or something? I don't know. I haven't thought it through that far.
What's the plan, Lori? Let's get it going. Yeah. I mean, I think again, this is a big part of why we decided to focus on the podcast, because it's open. Anybody can listen to it and you'll get a really good taste real fast of what we're about and be able to kind of join that community. So, I think that once that launches, we are doing quite a bit of advertising around it and doing a big push for about 6 months to try to build an audience there. That's really the main focus right now, is to build an audience through getting the stuff out and creating these groups where people can, in a small group format, get to know each other. And you all being able to be advocates for that and pass that around to all of your circles will be a huge help. That'll be, once the podcast launches, then that's where a lot of my attention will kind of shift, is to making those connections and trying to partner with these organizations and let people know. That's everything that we're doing right now. Dan and I talk about it as boost the signal. That's where we are, trying to boost the signal and reach the artists. We're not interested in being a podcast. We're not really interested in being podcasters, and it will only go on as long as it's kind of useful to use, but it's just a calling card right now. yeah, to try to boost that signal. And so you can pray like crazy that that God takes the resources that he gave us to do it, and really does boost that signal to find the people who are looking for us. We can go find them. And then I can't overstate this, and I think it's hard to really understand, especially because we're small, but your presence in the collectives or different small group or the creative prayer on Sunday nights will be essential. It already is essential, I know, for building that sense of welcome and community for those who come in. But as new people come in, having others there that get it, that can speak to what they are feeling and thinking, will be the difference between whether or not they feel like they can stay and have a home, or it's just kind of like, yeah, that was cool. So I think there's a huge role in the building phase that hopefully will come next. But yeah, we're getting ready to move into boost the signal phase. Cool.
And I just want to say that although we're stating in their mission statement to ourselves that we're not podcasters, the podcast sounds awesome. And it sounds better than most podcasts I've heard. So just spoiler alert, it's really good, but we're trying to go into it saying we're not podcasters, but
as a career.
But it's really, I think once people listen to it, they'll get more in 45 minutes about the philosophy and who we are than if they came to a few services. So I think it's going to be a really great resource and tool to really boost that signal, like Lisa said, like the bat signal.
Just on a programming note too, I haven't mentioned this tonight, but we do have a retreat coming up at the end of October, which is focused on the stories we tell or the stories we live. But that's really also going to be a theme for the fall and probably going into 2024, of looking at what is God's story and what is my story within God's story. And that's a huge piece also of the Soulmakers curriculum. And we're going to, I haven't worked out the details of exactly how we're going to do it, but we're going to offer a sort of a Bible study discussion time on the story, again, using the Bema podcast and probably the Bible Project podcast, some of their resources, to look at the story of the Bible from the story. And have, so I'm not going to do the teaching. We're going to outsource the teaching, and then we'll come together to have the discussion and the application piece of things. So that's another opportunity from another small group kind of perspective. So yeah, we're going to continue to add to our gym so that you can work out in whatever way you need to work out.
I'm just gonna jump in here a minute, Lisa.
Yeah.
Just listening to some of the reconnecting. I'm one of these people who likes to talk it out, so listening to a podcast on my own is great, but going somewhere with it is challenging. So I like the idea of, connecting with a group of, and I know, believe it or not, I know on TV now you can sign up for watch parties. So is there a way we could sign up for listen parties?
That's a cool idea.
We listen to the podcast and then we can, be on Zoom. I don't know how it would work, but so we have a listen party and then we can sit and not rip it apart, but rip it apart.
That was good, Rita.
Rita, there is a way to do that. So I just wrote it down. Yeah.
So that might be an interesting thing, is that, your podcast, it gets advertised, and say we, I don't know, we might say register 8 people, sign up for a listen party. And then either you chat about it after the podcast, depending on how long each podcast is. So it's just another way of connecting.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great idea.
And they could be regionally based, like the southeast section, the so-and-so, the so-and-so. And so you could find like your spot, and maybe
Mhm.
even that would be a way to start to have humans seen, in the same room with each other.
Yeah.
Yes, Anita.
You could have to inspire conversation or dialogue. You could have 5 questions that came directly from the podcast as talking points.
That's a great idea too. Yeah. That's a great idea. Very cool.
But really cool questions like, what's the most offensive thing that you heard today?
That's
Just
hilarious. We just had a session. We recorded a session with Elise, following up on the Wise-Hearted Ones about aesthetics and architecture. And then Dan and Elise and I talked about why does it matter that you make art when the world is burning? Why don't you do something more meaningful with your life?
I
And
love it.
Dan's response to that question was, I'm offended by that question. And we had a great conversation about why that question is offensive. And it's really, really good. So it's funny that
Yeah.
you said that.
Yeah, and I really backed it up, guys.
Yeah,
So
you did. It was a good answer. And I agree, it is an offensive question. Well, anyway, does anybody have any other questions you are just dying to ask? Thanks for not asking any overtly personal questions. That would be embarrassing.
that's what I thought you guys were here to ask. So I was like all prepared. I was like, let's do it. One time a year, I'll really open up.
Well, we're in the midst of the podcast thing, so we can definitely use your prayers for that. But we will be getting ready to start planning for next year and budgeting and putting things in place. And so your input and thoughts are really valuable to us. And also, I guess my final question to you would be to ask, how might you be able to help us to help other artists? Dan and I, Rita, all of us are really committed to pouring everything we've got into the people that come across our path. It is certainly my passion and my joy. And I also recognize that, there's only so much we can do as individuals. And I really do believe that God has brought you here for this time. It's been amazing to me, just exactly who has shown up in the last year and a half, 2 years, added that to our community that we already have. I don't think that is, I know that's not an accident. That's what God is preparing. So maybe just to ask yourself and to ask God, how might you be able to contribute to helping to support the artists that come to us, believing that maybe you're here for a bigger reason than maybe you initially thought. Just think about that. And if you end up having some answers, let me know. Well, thank you. Thank you for making the time and just hanging out and for caring at all. And thank you for what you do and what you contribute in each of the spaces that you inhabit, and especially for what you bring to our conversations and Creative Prayer and the spiritual collectives, and our time together is just so rich. And that's because of you. And really, you are an incredible blessing to me and to us. And it's been really wonderful. So I'm glad you're here, and I hope you'll continue on the journey with us. And anytime, please give us a call or send an email. I'm gonna listen back over this, take some notes. Dan and I will talk about some things, but definitely have heard we have to find a way to get everybody connected so that you guys can talk to each other and start to build networks. So definitely heard that, and we will start working on that. All right. Great. Well, thanks. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Bye.